going back in time to expand a world that most of us already know. And so I think that there were a lot of attempts, I think, to expand this universe. And I think this one has the potential of really working, because this one will work. Because it is working. I can't wait for you guys to see it all. Because it really is about this family and about the relationships that they have and the fight that they fight to keep each other together. And when you talk about Supernatural, it really boils down to the two brothers doing what they can do, anything that they can do to never give up on each other and to fight for what they believe in. And so to now get to unpack where that DNA comes from, where we see that they got that drive and that heart and that determination and that work ethic. It all stems from these two characters, John and Mary, and so we get to see the beginnings and how that relates to where it goes in the future. And it's also just a really cool time period. We have a very diverse writing staff, and also something that we have done with our directors. We would be doing this, we would be attempting this anyway, but the network has not only heavily encouraged us, but they basically mandated us to be very diverse in either women or POC, and so that is happening, and it's one thing that I think Mark Pedowitz, one of the many things that he did fantastic with CW was bringing that diversity and being a champion for it in our industry. And I feel like that is a voice that will be missed at the network. I hope that the new regime that comes in picks up that sword and continues to fight that fight.
We're also involved in the Warner Brothers Workshop program, which they bring in writers and also directors, and it's up to each show if they're going to utilize that program or not. We have chosen to do that, so we'll be bringing in new voices who are getting started as both in the writing room and directors.
We did have a lot of older white men, straight men. That was the nature of the show and the nature of how it kind of was built and laid out. But everyone was always well aware that it was that, and that we needed to make an effort not to do that or to diversify.
What is the music that we're going to get to see in this, and how does it play a part in the creation of John's love for it that he passed on to his son?
Depends on the ratings, because we need a lot of people to watch the show.
So we can get a music budget, because the music budget's tight. But I will say real quick, and then I want her to answer this. When we first started this journey with Robbie and the two of us, she sent out probably one of the first emails regarding this project was a playlist that she made, and it was all of that kind of music. But the tricky thing was we were trying to be time authentic. There was a lot that happened after 73. There's a lot of good music that we were like, oh.
Well, because 1972 still has a lot of carryover from the late 60s, so you do have, so you still have some of that.
You're getting doo-wop.
Well, there's
and
a
stuff,
lot of
even,
the Supremes and the, a lot of R&B, a lot of,
it'll skew older, but I mean, there's a lot of great music came out in the late 60s.
Yeah, it's fun.
And we might be asking for forgiveness on a few songs if it was that was 75. Well,
have you met any resistance from artists who don't want you to use their stuff?
Not yet. No,
Okay.
and I think that Supernatural did a lot of legwork as far as that goes, because people are like, oh yeah, I know. I mean, so you talk about Kansas, for instance, those guys, they're Supernatural needs us, and they're Superman, they just show up. It's we just put the bat signal out for Kansas.
Someone's recording this, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's this band called Greta Von Fleet.
Oh yeah,
And I'm obsessed with them, and Jensen's obsessed with them, and we really want them to come on and
should we
do
tag
a
you in this
song.
photo?
Yes, tag Greta Von Fleet and say, we know you're modern, but you sound like we need you to sound.
I have DM'd them a lot, and they probably just whoever's running it is
yeah.
The fan will get right on that. I've already seen that.
Okay.
It's been mentioned in the
Please, Greta Von Fleet.
Yes.
We will help
We
you out.
need you.
All right. Amazing.
Did you guys watch all of Supernatural before you got involved in this?
All 335 episodes. No, I actually grew up watching it. So
okay.
I finished, I think, season 12 and then 13. I don't know what happened in life, but I didn't continue with 13. But I did go back and rewatch
Okay.
15, just so I could kind of see, like, hey, where did we end up? Yeah.
Yeah, and now I've been watching it. I watched the pilot and a bunch of like Mary John heavy episodes.
Okay.
So yeah, it's such an amazing show. And when I was younger, I was way too scared to watch it. So yeah, it was but it's great.
When you were younger, you're still too.
I know I am really scared. The episodes now still scare me, and when we're filming, I get really scared.
Some of
but
the
it's fine.
episodes are scary in the original.
Terrifying.
Yeah, they are. That's a scary one.
That's what I keep telling Robbie. I'm like, as long as we can get back to that, like if we can go back to the dark, the scary, like that's where I want to be. I want to live in that.
There's definitely a pressure, but I feel like a good pressure because whenever we're on set, we're always constantly thinking about the fans and what they're hoping for and their expectations, and always hoping like, okay, in this scene, like how do we meet their expectations? Because we know it's really important. I think it's a good pressure, but you know, it's definitely a little nerve-wracking for sure.
It's definitely a massive responsibility because there's such people already have their opinions of these characters, and so trying to give your own take while also honoring what's been laid out before you, it's a huge responsibility. But like she's saying, I think it's one that I think we all like honestly love and love to take on because it keeps you on your game. It's like you have to think about all these things of like, well, how are they going to receive this versus what am I trying to say? So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. Honestly, it's been really cool. I also always loved the character John, and I was really, really excited to take that character on because of the stigma and the opinions surrounding the character. I thought it was a really cool place to like start. Was I get to give context, and I think context is something nowadays that we lack that is incredibly important when you're trying to judge or understand people. So yeah, I had the opportunity now to watch 15 seasons, but there's so much this has been laid out, so I got to look and say like, this is where I end, where do I want to start, and how can I show the biggest transition of the character. So
with Mary, I think she was always such interesting, complex character. It's really awesome to give context into, the huge decision that she ends up making with Sam and choosing her own fate. Thank you so much. So giving context to all of that was really important, I think, and also I feel like there's a stigma around Mary as well. So why are you laughing?
so hot.
You just burned your entire
everything.
but yes, I've definitely watched their performances and tried to bring my own take into it.
And I've really kind of just played it as like that fun, youthful, happy, non-abusive father John. Never. There is no change. Like he's always there. It's just clouded and by this idea of who I have to be, who I have to become to like survive in this world. So yeah, it's been exciting. It's been a really exciting challenge. And yeah, as a fan, like I also know what I want to see. So that's also kind of a cool element to play with. One thing that we've talked about, which is it's always interesting to think about, because when you do the 70s music, you're like, oh, like it's what's current and what's hip, but it's like if it's the 70s, we're probably in the 60s. Especially John, who's behind his time. So it's been cool. It's been really cool to like go back, and that was all we did when we first met as a cast. Was we created an album called Demon Hunting and Ghost Slang or something like that. And we went through and we just laid out like as many 70s, 60s, some 50s songs, and just it's cool. You just click play on the album, you're in the headspace, you're in the era.
It's really awesome. And also being in the 70s too, like the music is so important, and we talk about like bands and we always like intertwine that in the script, especially with Carlos, who is like wants to be a musician, and that's kind of like their whole storyline, which is really, really fascinating. It's going to be really fun to bring in the 70s music in that way through Carlos, but also hunting as well. Like we don't have phones, we don't have the technology as well, so it makes our connections that much stronger because we're really relying on each other and really counting on each other's word of like, oh, are you going to be there? Because once you're there's no way to find out unless there's a payphone nearby. So that's been really, really cool. And the lore books have been so awesome too, because you get to like look through the books instead of kind of like the computer, I guess. So it's been cool.
The original show
Yeah.
has such a rich lore and mythology.
Yeah.
How was it working backwards now and having to develop what happened beforehand while not sacrificing anything
Yeah.
that was in the show?
It's been a unique challenge, when you're stepping into a universe that is so lived in. We really had that Hippocratic Oath, do no harm kind of vibe. We didn't want to upend anything. That led to very early on figuring out that let's do a different monster for our sort of big bad of the season, which are these sort of creepy crawlers that you guys will meet shortly. And that was a big help. But then we also were like, okay, well, we have 327 episodes to look at. We didn't hit all the monsters. Like, they could have done 327 more episodes. So it was always, how do we find a new monster, something we haven't seen, something that feels within the supernatural universe, but something that can be a little bit broader in its scope. We were very Judeo-Christian and a lot of that stuff, and so it was an opportunity for us to kind of dip into other things. So the challenge was, okay, how do we make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's? But the great thing is this is one of the most well-documented shows on the internet. So it was a combination of let's check our math, but then let's also create new math.
Okay, thank you.
We treat it as canon, and we actually have a supernatural technical advisor, who is Jules, who runs the Supernatural Wiki, who helps check our math, literally. But we also had a rule on Supernatural, which was, okay, like, it has to make sure that it's cohesive and that it's like making sense, but we don't ever want it to impede on the story. And there's always a way to kind of wiggle your way into or wiggle your way out of certain canon things. So it is canon. Like, we don't want to change anything. The lesson I learned on Supernatural after writing 18 episodes was there's what I intend, and then there's what the audience, sees. And the audience comes with their own perspective, but that's also the beauty of it. It's a dance with us. Once this airs on Tuesday, or once you guys watch it in a couple of hours, it's yours now. It's not mine. And so what people choose to do with that is not only their own business, but to me is wonderful. Like, it allows people to tell their own story with it. So I wouldn't say it's pressure. There's sometimes, I think, a pressure on the opposite end, which is wanting to put those things in, and then you run the danger of being like the Easter egg show. You know what I mean? But I end up being like the Easter bunny anyways. I'm always little things here and there. We have also a fantastic crew in New Orleans. They're now either having watched it because they grew up watching it, or they're watching it now as research for the show, and they're constantly pitching me things. Our cast, Drake in particular, is like an encyclopedia. It's really, really wonderful when you work with collaborators who want the show to aspire to what 15 years aspired to, which was an unheralded, insane run that is probably going to be unmatched. When I first started thinking about it, that was my concern. That to be able to kind of strip it back to basics and do Monsters of the Week and things like that, and not have to have, I joined season 7, you know what I mean? And in season 7, I'm just who did this and said that? We are beholden to what, obviously what the show becomes. At the same time, going back to basics, we do 2 or 3 Monsters of the Week right out of the gate, and boy, that was just pure joy. It was just pure joy to just kind of get into that. I like to say that the show is a throwback in 2 senses. It takes place in 1972, but it's also the kind of TV I grew up watching, which was the more episodic kind of thing. I feel like it's an art that's being lost now in the streaming world, and everything is a 13-hour movie, which is awesome, great. But I also like a one and done kind of a deal as well. We have more than a few familiar faces that are coming that are not just named Jensen Ackles, and although him too. But it always has to be. When I was on Supernatural, whether it was Bob and Sarah or Bob and Jeremy, they never said no to an idea. They were always just what's the story? And so someone can say, oh, I'd love to see character X. Well, that's great, but what's the story? If you pitch me a story, then I put whoever you want in it. Put anybody. Put Superman. There has to be a story. And so far we found, I think, some really creative ways to get both some familiar names, some familiar faces. And then we also have, I think, a little bit of latitude to be able to also maybe bring some faces back in different roles, maybe down the road once we have our sort of firm foundation. So no, I think, we want we want to be able to play also with our friends, and people that we work with as well. It is not an indictment of Supernatural or anything like that, but it was developed a long time ago. Things have changed, I think, for the better. Diversity is great, inclusion is better. And so we had an opportunity from jump to really differentiate ourselves by having more than just a two-hander. Obviously this is John and Mary's supernatural love story, but within that, it was who are the people that are with them. The thing that I really truly loved about Supernatural, whether it was season 1 or season 15, the family don't end in blood is really to me about the family that you find. Because there's a family you're born into, which is for some people like myself that are blessed, it's a wonderful thing. For some people, they're not as blessed, it's a terrible thing. But then there's the family that you make, and that was really important to be as inclusive in that family as possible from the beginning. For me, it's just I want to see my family on screen. My mom is Mexican. My wife is Latin. And they don't often get represented in a very favorable light, unfortunately, still to this day, and it really bothers me. And it's nice to be in a position and to have partners like Jensen and Daniil and a studio and a network that feel the same way.